made you decide to put together this documentary telling about our family stories?
I guess it was because of my grandfather. I consider him the original Padmo family storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember when we were growing up, he used to tell me all about their family history. And I was always around him. He would talk about his brothers, how they died, how they traveled, his parents. And I was just a spoiled little child because everywhere he went, I would be next to him. So when he's sitting on the steps in his chair, smoking his cigarettes, and he loved to smoke. He smoked a pack a day. And so I'll be sitting there listening to these stories. So that's where I got my love for family history and stories because we didn't have much to do up there in the evenings, and I love my grandpa, so I wanted to be around him listening to these stories, and that's where I got this interest in the family story. Another thing that happened was, so I forgot about it, and then growing up, I started talking to cousin Arthur a lot, and we remember we used to go for happy hours, and he would talk about the same Padmo story, but from his generation. And then we went to, I got interested in Barbados. So remember when we went to Barbados? That was I was so interested in where we came from. We went to Barbados, our first trip, and we toured the island, and I loved the country and decided to go back. And so the second trip was in 2013 when I went back more to do research on our family and the people who came from Barbados. I went to the University of the West Indies and met with a professor there who helped me. I think her name was Celia or something, I forget now. But I met with her and she helped me to go through the records. The Barbadians are very good at record keeping. We also went up to Christ Church, went to the church, where the church also have these big books where they have all the records. I made copies of the documents that some of the Padmo people have written back, letters they have written back to their relatives that they had left in Barbados, telling them about what had happened to the people who came on the Cora and had settled in Kosovo, how they were doing. And so that's where my passion came from. So I came back with a lot of documents, and this was 2013 when I brought back the ship manifest that I had seen at the University of the West Indies. I took it to the family reunion and made copies for everybody to see, all the people who were on the Cora. All these documents I made copies of and brought back. So that was my initial interest. What was extraordinary about my grandpa Jacob was that he got all the kids to love him. All the grandkids love him. He was always bringing us treats. And even the older teenage grandkids love him. They always took advantage of him to, like, stealing his car and going to dance. And they knew he wouldn't get too mad with them, but he was a gentle, kind person. Although my grandparents had their grandchildren living in the house, in Kosovo, in the Padmo house, but they also took in children from the different villages. But once you came into that house, we all grew up like family, like brothers and sisters. They didn't treat, there were no different rules and treatment for the children that they took in versus their own children.
So what would you say their personalities were like?
Oh, my grandma had impeccable style. The matriarch of our family was Nancy Goodrich Padmo. She opened up her heart and her home to countless children, her grandchildren and children from the surrounding villages. Everybody in Kosovo loved her. Back in the day, right, where you didn't have shopping malls and all that kind of stuff, my grandfather, because he worked in Monrovia at the Interior Department, he ordered all the household items from a catalog, the Montgomery Ward catalog, ordered me this big doll baby from the catalog, and Montgomery Ward catalog in America. So he always ordered all his clothes, all of our clothes he ordered from the catalog, keeping us, well dressed. My grandfather Jacob was always well dressed.
Mhm.
You could describe him as the best dressed man in the community. When he
Okay.
entered a room, you knew he was there. And he had a funny side to him.
Mhm.
So people love him. People call him Jacob, but most people knew him as Patty.
Mm.
Everybody call him Patty. All the children in the house call him Patty. But my brother and myself, we call him Papa because he was like our father.
Right.
But everybody, you say Patty, everybody knew you were talking about Jacob Padmore.
Okay.
Nancy and Jacob Padmore never ever wavered in wanting the best for all of their grandchildren.
Mhm.
They cared for us. In fact, my grandfather paid our tuition until he died.
What did your grandparents do for a living?
Well, my grandfather, Jacob Padmore, was superintendent of the Native Appellate Court. This was part of what they called, at that time, the Department of Interior. And then later on, they changed the names from departments to local government. He negotiated several disputes between the indigenous people, earning their respect. There was no doubt that he was a very efficient superintendent in the Interior Department. We were not rich, but we never felt like we were poor. We were never hungry because there was an abundance of fruits and vegetables around. So you wanted a snack, you went to the tree and picked it. That's how we grew up. Jacob and Nancy loved each other dearly. He always, because he was working in Monrovia, whenever he came up on the weekend, he would bring her Oxford cookies and special treats. And I remembered when she got sick and had to come to Monrovia, so we all had to come to Monrovia to stay. The older kids went to boarding schools. Some of them went to boarding schools. Some of them went to schools in Monrovia. My brother and myself we went to live at my father's house with my grandfather because he was already living at my father's house in Monrovia because he worked in Monrovia during the week. So it just seemed natural because we were like his children. So we moved in with him at my father's house. So during my grandmother's illness in Monrovia, my grandfather became our protector when we lived with him at my father's house. We were all very close. We were very close to him. I remember the last weekend he was at that house before he died. He was going up to Crosserville for the weekend. And for some reason, we weren't going up because we used to go up to Crosserville on the weekend for church. And for some reason, we weren't going up to Crosserville. So I remember waving. We ran behind the car, waving until the car was out of sight. And that was his last weekend because a couple of days later, I guess that Monday, he didn't come back to Monrovia, and then we got the word that he had passed away. My grandmother died. My grandmother had died a year and a half before him.
Okay.
And so after that, it was like the bottom fell out of our lives because they were both gone. But those two people, Nancy and Jacob, they truly cared for each other. And my grandfather never remarried. Never remarried after that. He got a caretaker to take care of the house in Crosserville when he was in Monrovia. And it wasn't long after that he passed away. You can say he died from a broken heart.
So the settlers seem to have done well for themselves in Crosserville, but did they have any disputes or disagreements?
For the most part, they got along well, but as any community, they did have issues and incidents. And one incident I remember so well, and was that this incident involved Cousin Albert Port. We call him Teacher Port because he used to be a teacher of the school at one time. But Cousin Albert Port had a farm. He lived further down Crosserville, back of where Christ Church, where the church is, the original church, Christ Church. That was where he lived. And we lived up Crosserville, closer to the Bensonville side, or Bentall side. But at that time we called it Bensonville. So Cousin Albert had a farm up near where my grandparents' house was, the Papal house. And this afternoon, cousin Albert he walked, because not many people used to have cars. If they had cars, they were probably doing something else. But he was walking up the street going to his farm. He walked past our house on Lemongrass Street, went to his farm, and as he was going, my grandmother was sitting on the front porch, what we call the piazza of the house, the downstairs piazza, where she sat in the afternoon. And cousin Albert was going to his farm. He didn't stop. Usually he would stop and say hello, because they will consider themselves cousins. He went to his farm. It wasn't a few minutes later, we heard gunshots, pop, pop, pop. And then when we look, everybody was, surprised, but you hear gunshots, sometimes people are hunting and stuff like that. But then cousin Albert comes stepping up to our house, walk up the steps, and he says, "Hello, Cousin Nancy." Cousin Nancy is cousin Nancy. I came to tell you that I just killed one of your pigs. It was rooting around in my farm, and send your boys to go pick it up. So my grandmother said, "But Albert, you could have at least stopped and told me to send the boys to go get the pig." But he was like, "Yeah, send them to pick it up." And he left, and he said, "Good day," and she offered him something to drink. I don't remember if he had a glass of water or whatever. But that's how calm they were. There was no cussing and yelling and screaming and all of that. He left, and the boys went and got the pig. They cleaned it up, and she wrapped up a whole quarter and sent it to him. Told him, "Take this quarter down to cousin Albert and his wife." But that's how they were. And after that, there was no. You saw him, they hugged and kissed in the church, or when when they were together. That was it. She felt her pig shouldn't have been in his farm, and she sent him a quarter. But that's how they settled disputes. So, but that was one of the funny. I know most people don't know that Albert Poe stories. All they hear about Albert Poe is his issues he had with the president. He was one of those people who didn't like to see injustice, and he wanted the government to change. And people know him for that. But he was also a teacher. And he was a farmer, and he had a very lovely wife.
Okay. So, what are your favorite Liberian traditions?
One of the popular Liberian traditions is the Grand March. They do it at weddings, and it's been from the time I was a little girl. Every big event, 26-day balls, or dances, or school events. Big presidential events, they did the Grand March, and we did it at your wedding, and you liked it, right? You liked it. In fact, you requested the Grand March.
Bodyguard for life. From body to body, if you want to enjoy mine, come to party. Till we go shake to. I want Saleh, I want ballet. One Makale, anybody back nyale. Overload, not to your business, but in a party you come. Left me make an overload. If you at you gonna do, yeah. From body to body, if you want to enjoy mine. But the summer is over for me. And if I should forget you, therefore I forget my life.
So that's one of the traditions. Another thing that's unique to Liberians is the women always have V-rings, gold V-rings, like the one I have and the one that you have. So if you see a V-ring, you can most definitely think that person's from Liberia or have some connection to Liberia or got it as a gift. So you have the V-ring, and some people have the V-bracelet, but it's something that that's unique to the Liberian lady, the V-ring.
Okay.
my grandmother for instilling family values in me. There's not a day that go by that I don't remember them, and I have a special way of remembering them every evening before I go to bed.
What's that?
That's a secret.
Okay.
But it's something I do every night before I go to bed. Every
Okay.
night, no matter where I am in the world, I do it.
Mhm.
And that's my way of remembering them and keeping them in my heart forever.